Hello, I'm Mo Ivory in for Roland Martin. Today on News 1 Now, we have an update on the death of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was gunned down by Cleveland police. To indict or not to indict, we're going to explain the entire grand jury process. America's wealth coach, Deborah Owens, will help you give the gift of wealth with stocks as a present. Plus, jazzy soul singer Kenya quit her day job and followed her dreams of making music. She's going to share her inspiring story of success. All that and more coming up right now on News 1 Now. This morning, we're hearing new details of the day 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed by a Cleveland police officer. His mother said she just sent her child out to play on a typical Saturday afternoon.
I really thought they was playing, like joking around. But I seen the seriousness in their face and it scared me. Because my child doesn't do things like that. I don't allow that type of toy in my house around him, period.
The Cleveland County Prosecutor's Office has a policy to refer all fatal police shootings to a grand jury. The Rice family attorney, Benjamin Crump, says this police officer doesn't even deserve that due process.
This notion of due process of the law applies to Tamir Rice too, not just the police officer. So why are we going to give greater consideration to the police officer and the things that he did in that video, which I suggest is enough probable cause to indict the police officer now and have a trial by jury where everybody can see it, it can be transparent, and this family and this community can believe that justice system works for everybody equally.
Transparency that did not happen with the grand juries for Michael Brown and Eric Garner. Now, can we learn from past mistakes, and can transparency actually happen this time? Let's talk about it with my panel. Hogan Gidley is a senior political advisor for Bender Cox. Judith Brown Diana is co-director of the Advancement Project, and Rashad Robinson, executive director for Color of Change. Thank you all for joining this morning. And you know, heart-wrenching about Tamir Rice to see his mother speak for the first time and talk about so many things that I did not know about. The sister coming to the scene and being arrested and put in the car by the officer that just killed her brother. The mother having to make a choice of whether or not she would go to the hospital with Tamir or try to get the sister, you know, from out of being arrested or at the precinct. But really, here we go all over again. Another grand jury process, a prosecutor who people are going to be suspect of. It's in Cleveland, you know, who we all have doubts about what's happening in Cleveland and many other cities. Can there really be transparency in anybody believing that a grand jury process could be, you know, fair? Hogan.
Well, the question is, yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, I guess, because we've seen two cases now that have happened over this grand jury that have not given the result that a lot of people wanted the result to be. My follow-up to your question is, what happens when it does go to jury trial, and if the same thing, if the same verdict were rendered? Would everyone be okay with that too? Probably not. So the question then after that is, what do the police do differently? How do they act in a situation like that that is proper, that follows code, that makes everybody understand they did everything they could? I'm not sure the answer to that question, but right now the communities, this country is fractured. They're upset. They don't understand why these deaths senselessly, needlessly keep happening, and we're going to have a more transparent process if anyone is going to be calm about the situation.
Judith, not just what can the police do differently, but what can the prosecutors do differently? I mean, we kind of tend to forget that the prosecutors don't have to take it to a grand jury if they don't want to. They can charge right then and there. I mean, there are options, and transparency begins from the minute something has happened, and then it goes to the police station, and then a prosecutor gets their hands on it.
Right. Well, we learned a lot from the Ferguson situation and that prosecutor who really, you know, decided to go to a grand jury when he didn't have to. Right. Sometimes it becomes like a CYA moment. Right. I'm going to give it to them so that I don't have to have responsibility for this. And what happens is that you're dealing with prosecutors prosecutors who have to deal with the police all the time, who have to rely on the police for the cases that they bring. And so the relationship is way too close for them to have any level of independence and neutrality. And in fact, he did the closing argument. When he made that press statement and he came out and made his speech, it actually was the closing argument for the defense instead of for the prosecution.
It was wrought with so many problems. And Rashad, we have just a couple of minutes in this segment, and I'm going to come back and let you fully explain. Well, what are your first thoughts? You know, you lead a very important organization that is at the forefront of the advocacy. Well, what are your initial thoughts about what will happen in this Tamir Rice situation in Cleveland with the transparency from the first day?
Well, the problem is that Cleveland is already under review. And so, you know, more eyes are on Cleveland right now, and more eyes are on situations like this in general. I think the big thing that all of us have to be concerned at is, yes, justice for Tamir Rice, ensuring this case goes through. But all of this brings us back to the point that we need greater reform in this country. We need reform at the DOJ level, the things that DOJ can move forward. We also need bipartisan legislation, some of which is on the table and will be coming back in the lame duck session. All of that are things that we need to be utilizing this moment where the whole world is watching, literally. The whole world is watching what America will do, a place that talks about justice here and around the world. What will we do in this moment to ensure that we actually put in place the real legislation that will hold police accountable and start bringing our communities together in ways that actually solve crime, that actually allow for people to trust police? Right now, we are in a moment where any one of these situations that come up, there's already going to be a concern that police can't be trusted, and that does none of us a disservice.
Sure, and it's not only that the police can't be trusted, but also that the powers that be that are supposed to sort of police the police cannot be trusted. And that's just layer upon layer of problems. So everybody shrugs their head at, again, the throwing around of the words, we'll choose a grand jury and we'll present the evidence and we'll do this. And we're hearing all these details, and nobody believes, I think even right at this moment, that anything different will happen for Tamir Rice's family than has happened for Garner, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, any families that have dealt with this going on and on. But we will continue to talk about this. Coming up, to indict or not to indict, we're going to actually explain the grand jury's entire process. America's Wealth Coach Deborah Owens is going to be here to give us a few stocking stuffers to help you build your wealth. And then she went from being a therapist to becoming a singer whose music soothes the minds of many. Neo-soul artist Kenya drops by the set with her new single. Hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter at News One or at Mo Ivory or on our News One Facebook page. It's 7 after the hour. Many people believe racial profiling led to the deaths of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Tamir Rice. In the midst of the nationwide call for justice, the federal government has now issued new guidelines to broaden a ban on racial profiling. The new Justice Department guidelines were laid out yesterday on Monday, and federal law enforcement agencies will no longer consider, these are the things, gender, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity. While this is good at the federal level, these guidelines don't apply to the local level at all. And isn't that where the work needs to be really done? Let's talk about that issue with our panel, Hogan Gidley, who is a senior political advisor for Brabender Cox, Judith Brown Dionese, co-director of the Advancement Project, and Rashad Robinson, executive director for Color of Change. And so, you know, I read the guidelines, and, you know, of course, like, bravo, Eric Holder, he's on his way out. He's still trying to do stuff. You know, I get it, and I know it begins to ease our frustration with feeling like nothing's being done. You know, let's get some legislation, let's do it. And then we get the new guidelines. But really? On the street at the local Ferguson Police Department? Do you think they're really sitting around saying, well, Eric Holder just issued these new guidelines and we're changing our behavior today?
What these people over here want to do, Republican or Democrat, is make it appear as though they're doing something. Whether they actually accomplish something at the local level to affect change, protect people, I don't even know that that matters to a lot of the folks over there. What they care about is getting reelected, and they care about having a high-profile status that they've actually put something forward, never going to happen, never going to actually make some change on a local level.
I have to disagree a little bit because Republicans have done nothing on this. Okay, they've done nothing. But this administration, okay, I'm not going to defend in full the administration, but they have taken some steps. The racial profiling guidelines don't go far enough by no means because they don't hit local authorities. In fact, local police departments could have been covered because of the fact that they receive federal dollars.
Yes.
And if you have the purse strings, you should be able to control it. And the other problem is that it exempted the FBI, Homeland Security, which means that the Border Patrol will continue to profile Latinos, right? And so they haven't gone far enough. They have taken some steps, and clearly they've put more money into body cameras, et cetera. But the other thing is that at the local level and in Congress, the End Racial Profiling Act, which has been introduced over and over and over again, Congress has not moved it. And this Congress, I would say, that's going to take over, Republican-led, is not going to move it either.
I mean, this is part of the federal demands that we've, put in front of the White House, is that the fact of the matter is that so much of local law enforcement is funded by federal tax dollars. And over again, the federal government has failed to incentivize good policing. So an example is the first question on the form that local law enforcement officials have to fill out when they're applying for federal funds is that, have you increased drug arrest? Not, did you need to increase drug arrest? Then there's no question about where did you increase drug arrest from?
Just have you.
Have you. So then they are incentivized to increase drug arrest from communities that have less power, from poor communities, because they need to increase it to keep their federal funds, to buy the newest and latest tanks, right? And so to the extent that there's the fact of the matter that we have no federal database on people that are killed by cops or hurt by cops.
Reporting, right.
There's no reporting. So we actually have no transparency into the actual problem.
Facts and numbers.
So these are all things that when you are giving local law enforcement money, that you can tie them to actually having to report back how they're actually using that money and ensure that they use that money well. And those are the things that can be done now, that we can start moving the ball, and 5 or 10 years from now, we can look back and say we made some changes.
And don't give money to those who are breaking the law, and take money. This is the other thing, is that they actually have the ability under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to take money back if they find that there's discrimination. And so that has got to be the tool. There's got to be a carrot and a stick.
But that's what I was saying. When I said these people, I meant everybody over there, Republicans absolutely included. But nothing's getting done. The things you're talking about that would actually effectuate change, they don't want to touch that because they want to protect their own fiefdoms for whatever those fiefdoms may look like. They want to protect those because they don't want to see any change, because they want to keep their own pockets lined. They want to stay employed, and they want to move up the ladder professionally, personally, and they do that by making those arrests you talk about.
But the problem is that they're going to find a problem. They're going to find a problem because personally, their seats are going to be taken because we're going to. I mean, there's going to be a lot of voting.
Yeah, and you can wrap everything up in politics and drag it out as long as you want to, and you can say, and all of these things that you were saying are so workable if the people wanted to make the change.
Right.
And the problem is that there's so much wrapped up in the consequences of those changes that I almost think it has to even be more personal to the police officer, right? It doesn't have, it changes at the high levels of all of the local departments. I want to see something that would impact immediate behavior of the police officers. And I say, just like when you have medical insurance or your car insurance, there's a deductible that you have to meet, right? So it comes out of your pocket before you get to use your insurance policy. How about police officers have a deductible out of their paycheck for every time that a lawsuit or a claim of excessive force or whatever comes to them, and they have to pay for it first before the union or wherever's insurance policy kicks in. In the last 5 years in New York City, they have paid out $500 million in claims from just for bad police behavior. Make the police officers have to contribute to that, and I tell you what, that behavior will begin to change immediately. And so I think it's going to take something that drastic, because we're talking about personal behavior that gets hidden so many times. There's the ones that we see on camera are only the few that we catch on camera.
But it's beyond even personal behavior. It's a culture that has been bred within police departments.
Absolutely.
And policies like broken windows theory that allow for it to happen. So it's both the individual, but this is is also a power equation.
Oh, sure.
Okay, this is about all of the rallies that we're seeing is about building power in communities of color that are going to hold people accountable, that are going to hold mayors accountable.
And I think that's the important thing for the folks who are watching at home who say, you know, is this the time to get involved? This is the time to get involved. This is the time to stand up, to sign petitions, to turn out to rallies, to join the campaigns that are going to push the type of legislation. This is power concedes nothing, right? And if we don't build the type of strong movement that makes folks on Capitol Hill uncomfortable, that makes folks in state houses uncomfortable, and make them feel like in this moment they can't just sort of go home and not do anything, that they actually have to move forward legislation because the movement is not going away, that is going to be a movement that we can be proud of 5 or 10 years from now.
That is exactly right, Rochelle. We're going to talk about more. Boy, this gets me all riled up. Coming up, the nation's cry for justice began with what a grand jury did not do. After the break, Baltimore City Attorney Marilyn Mosby helps us understand exactly what a grand jury does do. Are you looking for the perfect present? Deborah Owens will help you with the gift of wealth with stocks. Her new single, Be Here, is climbing up the charts. Neo-soul artist Kenya joins us later in the show. And actor Nate Parker discusses a new project he's got in the works, and it's about the dehumanization of the black man in America. Hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter at News One or at Mo Ivory, and we'll be back on our News One Facebook page. It is 19 after the hour. After the non-indictment of the officers who killed Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and John Crawford, many wondered what exactly is the purpose of a grand jury. By definition, an indictment is a jury that examines accusations against persons charged with a crime. And if the evidence warrants, they make formal charges on which the accused persons are later tried. Now, here are some points about grand juries. There is no judge during the proceedings. The prosecutor is the only lawyer that presents their case. Any evidence the prosecutor brings is admissible in the grand jury. And most importantly, a grand jury does not determine guilt or innocence. Now, let me repeat that last point. A grand jury does not determine guilt or innocence. That happens at the trial. Now, that begs the question, why do we need grand juries in the first place? Here to explain is Baltimore City's State Attorney-elect Marilyn Mosby. And still on the panel, Hogan Gidley, Senior Political Advisor for Brabender Cox, Judith Brown Dianis, Co-Director of the Advancement Project, and Rashad Robinson, Executive Director for Color of Change. So thank you so much for joining us. Because,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of, people hear the term grand jury and they've just been sort of getting into the conversation like the grand jury came back with a verdict. You've heard that a lot. Right. The grand jury decided he was innocent. Those are the kinds of things that people that really don't understand the grand jury process have said. So just explain why a prosecutor goes to a grand jury and what choices he has not to.
Okay. Well, a grand jury will really go over and review the adequacy of evidence, and that evidence is presented by a prosecutor. So it's very different from a jury trial. A grand jury, you are going and actually saying, hey, I have probable cause to issue charges against an individual, and you're asking the jury, which is kind of like a checks and balances, to say, yeah, you have enough evidence to proceed against an individual.
Okay.
A jury trial is completely different. In a jury trial, you have a judge, you have a defense attorney, you have evidence that can or cannot be, may or may not be admissible at trial. Those are the very vast differences. You're asking for charges in a grand jury, whereas you're looking for guilt or innocence in a jury trial.
Okay, but in most, and let's just say, in Ferguson, in New York, in Cleveland, in most jurisdictions, a prosecutor, right, doesn't have to go to the grand jury. If he looks at the, oh wow, now this is a lot of problem, I'm going to charge. He can do that, correct?
So the way that it works is this. There are two ways in which you can actually go and ask that charges be issued against an individual. You can ask for criminal information, or you can ask for and put that information and put it in front of a grand jury. And the reason why you utilize a grand jury is because as a prosecutor, ethically, if you don't believe that there's probable cause, you should never even put it in front of a grand jury in the first place. However, with a criminal information, it's more of a you still have a checks and balances. You
On
have
yourself.
what's called
On yourself.
on yourself,
Okay,
because you
okay.
still have to go through a preliminary hearing.
Okay.
At which time it's a public hearing, and a judge will make a determination to checks and balance to say, yeah, you have sufficient enough evidence to proceed against an individual.
Okay, so in the instance of, let's say, for example, McCullough in Ferguson, he could have looked at everything in the Michael Brown situation and said, well, I have these many witnesses over here saying his hands were up, which, by the way, was more witnesses than said his hands were down, and could have said, I think that that is probable cause. I don't need to go to a grand jury. I'm going to go ahead and charge. He could have done that, correct?
Well, he could have done that, but he still would have been subject to a preliminary hearing
right.
in front of a judge.
Sure.
A judge would have made that determination as a checks and balances of his discretion to say, yes, he has enough information. Or he could have elected, and this is where it becomes problematic, is the process, right? He could have elected to put that in front of a grand jury, but as a prosecutor, your duty is to seek justice and not just convictions. So if you put evidence before a grand jury and you don't believe that the individual should be in front of a grand jury in the first place, then that's when it becomes problematic. And what we saw was a questionable process, because we have to question the motives.
So what I feel like I hear her saying, and panel jump in anytime, is that a prosecutor who's sort of not acting within what the intent of the process is can use the grand jury as a way to get himself out of the line of judgment for what he really wants to do anyway, which is not charge, and he can put that onto a grand jury.
Well, when you consider the fact that, and I have to say that federally in 2010, over 160,000 cases that were presented in front of a grand jury, only 11 of them were not indicted. So that tells you the evidence that's put forth is only by prosecutors. And in this particular case, you have, the defendant who came in and testified. We know that the prosecutor instructed the jury on the defenses for this individual, which is something that is usually done at the trial, not at the grand jury. We also know that there was wrong law that was actually given to the jury. So that process is what makes it rather questionable.
So what in your judgment do you think could change that process to make sure that these type of things do not happen? Where is the oversight of the checks and balances to make sure this doesn't happen?
The oversight and the checks and balances are with the people. I mean, these prosecutors on a local level, it's about accountability. And the way that you hold individuals accountable is you vote them in office. You have, in Ferguson, over 68% of the population is black, and less than 6% voted. So you have an individual who's been in office and does not share your interests or your values and is making decisions about your daily life. The tragedy of this incident is one in which, it tears my heart apart as a mother. But I gotta tell you that I'm glad that we're finally having the conversation and realizing how important that role of a prosecutor is and how awesome that discretion is that affects people's lives on a daily basis. And it starts on a local level. And so we say we bring in special prosecutors. We say let's have body cameras. We talk about training. But it starts with accountability.
Don't let him be in office.
Don't let him be in office.
That's where, yes.
I have a major question about the grand jury, because you just mentioned the percentages of black to white. Was it Missouri? I think you mentioned. Who made up the grand jury? Who's on that? Is that even public? Can that be public? Will it come out?
The grand jury is supposed to be secret.
Right.
And the reason is it protects the individuals that you are alleging have committed a crime. So the judge is the one, an administrative judge is the one who picks a grand jury, and so that information is shielded. In this case, you have a situation where justice has not been applied fairly and equally.
Right.
And in an effort, the prosecutor is saying to be transparent, he's put all that information out.
Yeah.
But this is not what he's usually done.
Yeah.
So when you apply justice unequally and unfairly, guess what the perception is?
Absolutely, that there is no justice.
Yes.
Listen, I want to like to thank everyone for being here. Coming up, America's Wealth Coach Deborah Owens is here to explain how this holiday season gift can pay off in the long run. And singer Kenya says it's never too late to follow your dreams. It's News 1 now, and we will be back. Let's have have some fun. It's the holiday season, but instead of buying your child the newest gadget or even the latest toy, invest in a gift that keeps on giving. America's Wealth coach Deborah Owens is here to break down everything you need to know about gifting stocks. Welcome, Deborah. Okay, like right off the bat, let me just say this. That does not sound like the box with the red ribbon that I'm looking for under the Christmas tree.
Well, I'm sure it doesn't, but here's what I want people to understand is one of the major reasons people don't invest is they've never been exposed to it.
Sure.
And so this really is about parents encouraging and exposing their children to stock at an early age. And we've got some great ways of doing it, and you don't need a lot of money to start investing.
Okay, so tell us how you do it. What are the ways to do it that brings, I want it to have the Christmas cheer in it. I want it to feel like something that somebody would want. How do you do that with stocks, and where do you even get started?
Okay, well, first thing, many kids are thinking about Beats headphones. They're thinking about that new iPhone 6. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to say, you're going to have Apple pay you a return. And one of the ways you do that is you start in a dividend reinvestment program. So one of the websites that I really encourage people to visit if they want to get started, it's called directinvesting.com.
Okay.
That allows you to invest in over 500 different stocks and then enroll in their dividend reinvestment program.
Okay.
So oftentimes people say, well, 3 shares of Apple or something might be $100 or $300 or so. But if you buy those shares of stock, Apple pays a dividend every quarter. You have those dividends reinvested every quarter, you're going to be buying more shares. So here's an example I want to show. In my book, Nickel and Dime Your Way to Wealth, a gentleman started out with 2 shares of IBM. He invested $200. 20 years later, that was worth $40,000. So it may not seem like a lot, but it's a great way to get started. Just put that dividend reinvestment program in a Christmas card, put it on under the tree, and then you begin to talk about your that investment as your statements come in the mail with your child. So that's one way you can get started.
All right.
Now, secondly,
I think you still have to buy some kind of toy or something to pair that with.
Okay,
so maybe,
well
so you maybe buy a little inexpensive, fun thing and pair it with the lesson and the stock certificate or whatever for what you're going to buy. That might be a compromise.
That takes me to my next favorite site for Christmas, and it's called oneshare.com. Now, oneshare.com allows you to invest in 1 share of stock, but you actually receive the gift certificate framed. You can pick out the frame that you want that gift certificate to go into. Then you're going to have something really great. You can put it on the wall in your child's room, and that way, Disney stock, Apple stock, Honda
names
stock.
that they recognize.
Another company I'm thinking about is EA, Electronic Arts, that makes the video games, or Sony. So now you have that visual on your wall. It is something tangible that you can see, and now you can begin to talk about that as well.
No, that is exciting, and I think you have to talk to kids about money very early on because they don't, understand the concept of saving. If you start at 2 or 3, or even saving bonds, or whatever is your choice of what you want to do, stock, savings, bonds, to get the idea around the holidays that this is a good gift to give, I think is a wonderful idea. But we are just so inundated in our society with consumerism and with the shopping and with that we just don't think that those things are, better than, which we know they are, a sweater or a toy.
Well, I love that, and I think that when you're shopping, that's a great way really to begin the conversation about shopping in the same companies that you buy things for. So now you have something tangible that you're giving your child. You're beginning to help them understand that stocks, that when we shop and we buy these things, we are increasing the profits in companies, and that's how the shares of stock go up. Now, lastly, I've talked about this so often, and I believe that giving the gift of college is such an important thing. If you look at the amount of debt particularly African American students are coming out with, one of the things I encourage parents to do is to start investing for college now. So one other tip I want to give our viewers is to go to giftofcollege.com.
Okay.
Now, what that does is you need to start a 529 investment program. You can do that by going to collegesavings.org and finding the plan in your state. But once you do that, you can encourage other members in your family or friends to buy a gift card now again you have something tangible, but it's an easy way to get others to invest in your child's college and their future as well.
That is wonderful, because all throughout the holiday season, relatives will call you and say, well, you know, what do they want and what does she need? Or the godparents, well, what do they want? What do they need? And it's not just during Christmas, but it's on their birthdays, and it's when they receive a special, you know, commendation at school, or they have, you know, some big accomplishment. So I think if you start to imagine that on each of those occasions you would ask somebody to deposit into a college fund or into a bond, imagine what would be there for them when they're 18.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you look at, and I know I'm, you know, many people feel like I'm always on this soapbox preaching about closing the wealth gap.
Yeah.
The main reason for the wealth gap, whether we understand it or not, is that African Americans in particular do not invest. And so one of the ways that what we have to do is make it easy. Why don't we invest?
Understandable, right?
Absolutely. It's because we're afraid. And so this is one of the ways I think you can take this shopping season and really make it not only educational, but also a time to get folks and our children in particular involved in building wealth.
Well, that's definitely real important. Can you one more time give each of those websites that you mentioned that are really important on getting started?
Absolutely. So the first website is directinvesting.com.
Okay.
That's where you can start a dividend reinvestment program, buy a couple of shares of stock, and allow the dividend reinvestments to invest in more.
Okay.
The other site is oneshare.com, oneshare.com, and that's where you can get that wonderful stock certificate frame. And last but not least, giftofcollege.com, giftofcollege.com, and that allows you to actually have other members and friends and families buy a gift card for a college savings program.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful information, and I hope everybody will take that to heed this holiday season. Coming up next, jazzy soul singer Kenya quit her day job and followed her dreams of making music. She's here to share her inspiring journey next. And actor Nate Parker addresses the recent turmoils of the African American man in his latest film. He tells us all about it. Hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter at News One or at Mo Ivory, or on our News One Facebook page. It's 43 after the hour. It's birthday shout-out time. Actor Kevin Daniels, best known for his role in the TV series Sirens, turns 38. Actor Richard Brooks, known for his role on Being Mary Jane, turns 53. And actor Michael Dorn, best known for his role as Klingon Worf in the Star Trek franchise, turns 62 years old. In 1872, Pinckney Pinchback becomes the first black governor in the United States when he serves as governor of Louisiana. In 1961, Tanzania gains independence from Great Britain. And in 1963, Zanzibar also gains independence from Great Britain. Now, some say music is therapy to the soul. I say that for sure. For my next guest, it saved her life and helped her fulfill her dreams. Kenya went from being a depressed therapist to using her neo-soul music to uplift many. Here is a bit of her new single, Be Here.
There's something that I need to say. Baby, please don't walk away. I never meant to hurt you, and I never meant to be untrue. I dedicate my life to you. Promise my love will be brand new. Just tell me that you'll always stay by my side and you'll never walk away. Never walk away. You'll always be there.
And it's my pleasure to welcome Kenya to the show. Kenya, welcome, first of all. You look so beautiful today. I was telling you what a beautiful color that is on you.
Thank you.
But I just want to understand your story about how you were not so happy being a therapist, and you decided that you just wanted to scrap it all and do what your real love is, which is music.
Yeah.
What was that process?
Yeah, you know, I'm a licensed physical therapist, and while I really enjoy taking care of patients, I mean, I think it's one of the most humbling experiences you can have is take care of somebody who's ill. I knew that there was a part of me missing. And I was just feeling very restless, and that then made me very irritable. And yeah, I mean, I think there was a slight depression going on there. But after, you know, having some come to Jesus moments and going to counseling myself, actually.
To make that decision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
It's a hard
counselor-
decision
It's
to
a
leave your
very
profession,
hard. Yes.
you know,
Yeah. It's scary. It's intimidating and all of that. But I think once you embrace who you really are and you feel that and you compare it, there's no comparison.
Sure. And so when that process was happening for you and you knew, you know, I really want to be a singer and I want to really dedicate my time and my life to it, what was the day that you were done as a therapist and you were now a singer?
The moment.
Yeah.
You know what? I honestly, I took it step by step. This wasn't a sudden, I'm quitting my day job doing it. No. I knew that it was coming. I could feel it. I had taken a spiritual retreat and learned a lot about really tapping into who you are and telling when your soul's speaking to you. So I said to myself, I'll know. It'll start feeling uncomfortable. I'll start feeling irritable. I'll start feeling restless. All those things again.
And all those things start to happen.
Yeah. And so it started coming. About 2 years ago, I could feel it. And I sat down with my husband and was like, we got to figure this out. We got to figure this out so that I can do this.
You know, so I think so many women can relate to this conversation. I know I can. I left being an attorney to pursue what I really wanted to do, was to be able to use my voice in a better way. And I think so you saying that it is a process. You know, it is talking to your husband, talking to your family, you know, maybe receiving the support of your friends. And, you know, and you're going to need them because sometimes the bills get tight and when you're pursuing your dreams,
the bills get real tight.
Oh, yeah. And so I think that's what holds people back is the idea that you don't end up at the end of the day, you know, looking like this and being a singer. So how has that process been that led you to, you know, the beautiful single we just heard, Be Here?
You know, it's been challenging in some areas, but honestly, it's been probably the most amazing experience ever. I think the more you realize how fear holds you back and paralyzes you,
so true.
When you let go of it and you see how much flow happens, while there's still some fear, you're like, but there's so much flow. So honestly, all the moments that seem like, oh my God, I'm just like, okay, here we go, let's keep going.
And even now, right?
Yeah,
and even now while you're in it, you are in the flow, but you still have the fears that pop up. But, you know, you allow the flow to be the more important part of the existence rather than the fear. So now you're a full-time singer. You have this beautiful single, Be Here. And what was the inspiration behind that?
You know, Be Here is about relationships. And I think all of us grown folk know relationships get complicated. They get very complicated. And I think there's too much extreme that we see. We see either just too happy or too broke down. And we don't see the middle of the road and how you have to be able to forgive. You know, one thing I've learned, I've been married 15 years, and I've learned that, you know, your partner is going to disappoint you.
Right.
You are going to disappoint them.
Wow.
And it is inevitable. It's actually supposed to be that, because that's what's going to push you to get closer.
Right.
So I wanted to tell that story. I don't know how much we hear that about forgiveness and dedication, and even though I messed up, I'm still here.
Wow.
So that's why.
I love that. I love that. And also, Be Here is, it makes me feel like that's part of the flow as well. Like just being in your situation and dealing with it. And it is a beautiful song. So how can people find you and get your music?
Yes, they can find me on Instagram, Twitter, at Kenya MJ Music.
Okay.
And my website is kenyamjmusic.com. And the music is on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play. So if you put Kenya and put Be Here, it'll pop up.
Awesome. And what do you have coming up that we can really look for?
There's so much coming up. I had an awesome show last night at Blues Alley here in Washington, D.C., and that was just fantastic. And so some more shows are coming up in the new year. If you go to my website, you'll see listings of shows. I think probably the biggest thing right now is planning for Grammys. I'll be in LA during that week and performing and checking out the site. So.
Oh, Kenya, that is so exciting, and I'm so glad that you stopped by to join us. And I want everybody to check her out and to support Kenya because she has an awesome story. I'm Mo Ivory in for Roland Martin, and this is News One Now. You can check out Nate Parker in the romantic drama Beyond the Lights. I love that movie. That's out in theaters now. However, he takes a step behind the camera, writing and directing his own film about being a black man in America. Hip Hollywood reporter Vanessa Barnett recently caught up with Parker to discuss his new movie, American.
While some have assembled in the streets to protest Brown's death, actor Nate Parker is hoping his short film, American, leads to a national discourse on the dehumanization of black men in America.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Here we go. Shut your mouth. Put your hands up, chest level. You know the drill.
We haven't been recognized as full rights carrying human citizens of the United States of America. With what happened with Mike Brown, the way the narrative unfolded and having him lying there on display, it was like a battle cry, like a silent battle cry.
Parker was in Ferguson during the first round of protests earlier this year, where he says an unsettling scene partially inspired the project that he also wrote.
I distinctly remember this visual of, you know, it was a street, and on one side of the street you heard people saying, "Justice for Mike Brown, justice for Mike Brown, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter." On the other side you heard, "Support our police force, support our police." And I'm thinking to myself, they're not even on the same page. They're completely missing each other.
American tells the story of a white police officer that opens fire on a teenager wearing a hoodie. Without revealing the film's twist, the officer's actions turn out to be fateful.
It's all right. That's all right.
I wanted to create some kind of piece of media that would let the action of the media speak louder than the words or the pleas of an entire demographic. If I can get you to try on this shoe of being a black man in America just for a moment, then maybe you will see my humanity. You know, and then maybe there's something to talk about.
Parker is adamant that the lives of black men in America are not valued in the same manner as others, but admits that ignorance is not limited to a specific community.
As black people, when we look at black life, you know, we suffer from inferiority complex. You know, we recognize the fact that our lives are valued less. And proof of that is going into, you know, if I go into like some of the, you know, the most despondent neighborhoods, I'm less safe than a white person walking through, you know, with their windbreakers on.
American is streaming in its entirety on YouTube. For HipHollywood.com, I'm Vanessa Barnett.
Thank you, Vanessa. And that was wonderful to see Nate Parker there getting involved in the cause, putting his money where his mouth is, making a film that maybe will show a different side of the struggle that we're experiencing in our country right now, you know, currently as we watch all of the protests go on over Eric Garner and Michael Brown. And we also saw another expression of that last night at the Cleveland Cavaliers game against the Brooklyn Nets, when we saw LeBron James and many of his teammates come out with the "I Can't Breathe" t-shirt, showing their gestures of support for Eric Garner's family and all for what has been going on. We hope to continue to see that and a movement towards a solution. Tomorrow on News 1 Now, it's the anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. We take a look back at that historic day. And it's Wildin' Out Wednesday, and the comedians will be in the house, you know, turning it up. Be sure to go to news1.com for more stories and updates. You can follow me on Twitter at Mo Ivory. Also, you can friend the show on the News 1 Facebook page. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. And thank you for joining us here on News 1 Now.